Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 105, How I Plan My Spring 2023 Semester for Writing. So this episode's going to be a little bit different from other ones because it just occurred to me that this is the time of year that I start planning my spring semester, and I set up when I'm going to actually do my writing, what kinds of writing projects am I going to work on, and so on. And I thought for this one, I would actually do it live. So if you are not watching the video, I will definitely describe the steps I'm taking to make sure that I've got writing blocked in where it needs to go. Time blocking certainly is a strategy that many people use to get writing accomplished, and I'll actually put a link in the show notes if it's something that you haven't done but you want to try. But I use it more as a way of sort of protecting my time and thinking very clearly and let's call it logistically about how I actually get writing completed in a semester. Because one of the things that's happening right now as I record this in December of 2023 is that I'm trying to set up my spring semester for success. So the time to do that is not the first week of classes in the spring semester to figure out, well, where am I going to write after all these other things get scheduled in? As many of us know as academics, it's very, very tough to find time where people don't want something from you, where you need to be in a meeting, where you have, other obligations that are eating your time. And so for me, for right now, the beauty between the fall semester and the spring semester, at least if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, you're maybe celebrating like a winter break of some sort. One of the beauties here is that a lot of people do take some time off. So I find that spring meetings are sometimes slower to be added to my calendar, which is great because I can make sure that my calendar is already blocked out for the things that I want to make sure I get accomplished before they get in there and take some of my time. So what I'm going to do now in this episode is just walk through my quick logistic process to make sure that I've got writing time blocked in there. And it's not just so much of me adding it to the calendar. It's about the thinking process that goes through with how do I determine when is a good time to get some writing completed, but also a chance where I have the most reasonable chance of success. So I'm going to take a minute for those of you that are just listening audio only and share with you, YouTube people, what you're going to see is my calendar for January 2023. It already has some things on it. For example, if I kind of look through some of these places, I have things like old writing times are still scheduled in there. I have school pickups. I have a hard stop every day at 2:15 for a school pickup. I'm pulled up a Wednesday, January 4th. My daughter's in a hip hop class for dancing at 7:45. So that's on my schedule. So some of these things are already in here. And I did play a little bit with color coding. I'm in Outlook. So I'm not a crazy color coder, but I do color code some things. Particularly the university that I'm at uses the colors black and orange. So anything university related, I tend to make orange. Anything for the company, I tend to make purple because that was the historical color for Defend and Publish. And then other things in there like writing time and some of these other things, I just put them on the calendar, and I think I've got some colors associated with those. But in general, I tend to leave my calendar on a month-long view just so I can kind of see ahead of time. But as many of us know that use Outlook, which is the one showing on the screen, it's only going to show you a couple of little slices in the month view. So I will click back and forth and show daily views and things like that. But what we're going to do right now is we're just looking at spring as a holistic thing. So for me, that's 16 weeks approximately of the semester. And for me, my spring semester starts on January 9th. So I'm only concerned about those days. My other days, I know I've talked about in a previous webinar where we talked about some writing strategies for December and moving into January. To me, that time is already accounted for. So right now, I'm just concerned about what happens on the first day of class starting on January 9th. So the way that I go about this is I always put in my classes first. So you always hear with time blocking, you want to put in your fixed obligations. In my case, I have some of those already in here because I know every day, every weekday, I have to pick up my daughter, or I have to leave to pick up my daughter at 2:15. So I know that that's something that is a fixed obligation unless, something changes. So that just stays on there. Some of the children's events and things like that are on there. Other things I like to do, like I mentioned in a couple of episodes ago, I started working out with a personal trainer once a week. So that's in there. I do a monthly Bible study. That's in there. There's some things like that are on there. But in general, I try to just get these fixed blocks worked out. And so the very first thing I'm going to do is put in my classes for the spring semester. So this particular semester, I have 2, and then I have a workshop that I run, and then I have some release time for administration. So I've already put in a workshop that I run that's kind of like a class for faculty to prepare them for tenure and promotion. But something else I'll need to do then is I need to add my class. So I'm just going to go ahead and put in a new event here. Whoops. To add my class in there. And let me put that in there just for what it is. And so for me, one of the things I like to do when I'm planning time for classes, as I don't just like to put the class time, I actually in my schedule, just to make sure I've got some room for breathing. And this is just in general around my classes, particularly with like night classes and that. This particular class is a 6 to 9 class that I'm starting to load on my calendar. Even though it doesn't start till 6, I'm going to start putting it, I start it at 5 on my calendar just to allow time for me to drive to work, which is about 10-ish minutes, 15 minutes. I live very close to where I work. So that I do that. So that way I just have a little bit more room, but also the time for like the classroom setup and just kind of getting my materials. And this is a graduate seminar, so sometimes students are there early and they want to talk. This is one of the ways that I'm already building in some of these things to think about in the spring, so it's not so rushed and so crazy. So, I'll go ahead and I will put it in here, and I'm going to drop it in and make it repeat. So I'm going to make it repeat weekly and all that kind of stuff. And I just pick whatever the end date is in mine. So I'll do that. And then I mentioned I categorize. So once I have a class listed on there, I do like to color code them. So I always make the stuff for the university orange. And I do that also because when I look at my calendar at a glance, I'm able to see, okay, this is probably a class, or this is a meeting, or it's something where I have to be somewhere that somebody requires something. So I'm not everything that's for my university position. If I just see orange, I know I have to be there. This is like a contractual obligation for me. So I'll throw that on the schedule. One thing I'm not going to do live in a workshop is that I also, with classes that will involve childcare coverage from my husband, I will definitely invite him to all of those. I'm not going to do that live, but I'm just showing that I'm blocking out a class. Another class that I have is on Mondays and Wednesdays. So if I'm going to add my other class in there, I'm just going to throw that one on there. This one meets Mondays and Wednesdays, so I'm going to have to set up that it repeats, and I know it's at 11 o'clock. One other thing that I will do, and that kind of helps me just logistically remember it's a new semester, it's a new class, is that I move classrooms a lot. So in this case, when I'm adding it on the schedule, I always say where it is, because at least for the first couple weeks of the semester, I'm always kind of rethinking, like, where is that class again? Where is that class again? And so I'm going to go ahead and then repeat it. So when I'll do the same, I just showed the Monday how I was doing it on screen, and I will have to do the same thing for a Wednesday day. So I'm not going to do that right at this moment. So I put those 2 classes in. I've already put in a workshop. And so my next move is to think about the boundaries of the workday. So in my case, once I drop off my daughter at school, I can reasonably be at work about 8:30 in the morning, and I have to leave at 2:15 to pick her up. So I've got all that sort of wonderful space that's open in there, except for teaching on Monday and Wednesday mornings, this workshop that I'm working, meetings and things like that. At the moment, I do have some meetings on my schedule. I'm still looking at the monthly view on my calendar at the moment, so I can't see where these individual meetings are. But what I try to do here is, once classes are in and once those deadlines about picking up kids and things like that are happening, also any kind of children's obligations, I've got most of those loaded on there, and some weekly calls and things that I do with clients. But once those things are on the calendar, the very next thing I'm looking for is my writing time. So in my preference has always been to do like a 2-hour block. And I normally like to do it in the afternoons. So if I could pick any time frame of day, I would pick, because I like to do 10 hours of writing a week, I would pick 1 to 3 p.m. That would be, if I could have anything for choosing a time, that's what I'd pick. However, that's not available to me because I have to leave at 2:15. So just like last semester, I'm going to, and I mentioned this on a previous podcast episode, I will have to pick 9 a.m. to 11, which is fine. I've done it before. I can do it again. And so for me, because I don't teach until 11 o'clock on Monday and Wednesdays, I'm able to figure out, okay, that's what I want to do. That's the time frame I want to use. So how this might work out for you is I might think thinking of this in a way that you're doing this via math. So you're making this very practical. You're thinking, how many hours a week do I ideally want to be writing? For me, 10 hours a week is sustainable for me to get a significant amount done. It's not so much that I feel overwhelmed by writing all the time. It's just a good clip for me. That's kind of been my goal for a long time since I've had children. 10 hours a week is about what I can do. Dissertation students, 10 hours a week might not be enough for you. You might need to really be doing 15 to 20 hours a week. Once we start creeping up past 20, it's unlikely you're probably working on writing longer than 20 hours a week. It just requires so much mental energy or, so many other things that go with it. You could be putting in 40 hours on your dissertation, but not all of that is writing time. It might be some reading time. It might be some research time. So I just try to get a grip on how many hours do I want to actually be writing this semester? And everybody always thinks more is better, or they'll say, well, as many as possible, but maybe that's not realistic for what is happening in your current semester. So this semester for me, this spring semester, is very light compared to what I was doing in the fall. In the fall, I was teaching 5 classes and juggling a couple of other obligations. So it was much more difficult for me to find the times that I needed to find. And so in that case, even though my goal would be to write 10 hours a week, if I wrote 8, I counted it as a win. So 8 hours a week was just fine. If I got to 10, fantastic. I had the writing book or the hours booked, but sometimes I just couldn't pull it off for whatever reason. So this would be a time to really think about how many hours you want to do, and then take a look at those holes in your schedule that are if you have children, during prime child-free hours. If you don't have children, look at times that are going to be the most ideal for you in terms of your energy, and that you're most likely to actually get it done. Because some of us I know have like student interruptions or family member interruptions or something like that. In my case, if I am at work, my children are at school, everybody's healthy, I have a reasonably good shot at getting work done. So I don't do my work at home. I've talked about this before on other podcasts and things like that. I like to write at work. So in my case, it's very useful for me to just look at, okay, what time works past, 8:30? When can I get some writing done? And the reason I'm picking 9 to 11 and not right at 8:30 is that I'm, again, building in a buffer, because I know that I'm going to want to go get a cup of coffee before I go to the library. I'm going to want to get all my materials and, have just a few minutes that if I have to run by the post office or I have to do something, I can do that. And so that's why I'm thinking very strategically about how can I make sure that this schedule is not stacked, that I have so many color-coded things on top of each other that it's crazy. So one of the things I see here, just looking at my screen for people that are looking on YouTube, is that on Monday, January 9th, I see that during my writing time, the very first day of class, I actually have a monthly Bible study that I like to do with some women that I've gotten together with for years. So I can see that day already. That's the first day of class. And I like to write on the first day of class because I like to set up the spring semester with the idea that writing is an integral part of what I'm doing. So one of the very first things I'm going to do, just because this happens to be the day that's up there, is I'm going to figure out when am I going to get some writing done on the first day of class. And I know that that's a podcast episode that I've done before. I will put a link to it in the show notes. But because I feel so strongly about this, I know the first day of class, especially this is an introductory undergraduate class, I'm guessing that I probably will not need them the entire full time. And so what I'm going to do just to solve this problem, so this is a good example of how I'm doing, figuring out a conflict with writing. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick in writing time just for this day only. I'll just call it writing time. I'm going to stick it in from 12 to 2. And so this particular day will be a little bit crazy because there's not room in there to really grab lunch or anything like that. But I know, because I can see this ahead of time, I know I can pack some stuff and bring it with me and have it to the library. So if I want to categorize this, at the moment, I didn't even categorize this as writing. I didn't even put a color in for that. So I'm just going to leave it as is. I'm going to go ahead and schedule writing time on that very first Monday when I can see I already have a conflict to not be able to do the time that I want. But for these other types of these other things that we're looking at, I'll just pick. I'm just going to pick another random day in here. I will pick the. Wait a minute. Okay. All right. I'm just going to pick a day just randomly in January that has some meetings and things like that on there. I can see just from doing a quick click through in January, there are going to be some days in here that I can't pull off a 9 to 11 time. So one of the things I caught when I was looking at Tuesdays is Tuesday, I often have a call that I have to do at 10 a.m. So that call either is going to have to move or I'm going to have to move when I'm doing my writing. In this case, I can see this is kind of a meeting heavy day. Once a month, I have heavy faculty meeting time day. However, I can still get some writing completed in here. So it's likely, because this is my busiest meeting day that I'm showing on the calendar, I could still sandwich in writing from 9 to 11. So in that case, I know I'm going to go ahead and add in writing time on that day. So what might happen is that some days I write 9 to 11, some days it's 12 to 2. So I can see already from looking at the schedule, this is probably what's going to happen. And I think the way that it will work out is that I'll have to have it day by day. So like, Mondays, I may have this, 12 to 2. Tuesdays, I might have 12 to, or 12:30 to 2:30. Well, I couldn't do 2:30, but 12:15 to 2:15, whatever the scenario is. And so why I'm doing this now is I'm just thinking about writing as the very next thing after teaching. So I make sure that it gets on there before I figure out anything else. So one thing that you'll notice from this exercise is that I'm catching conflicts already. And why this is useful is because I'm not letting myself off the hook and saying, well, that day is crazy. I've got 4 things. I'm not going to try to get writing in there. If it's possible, I'm going to still try to pull it off in there. I won't be able to do it every day, but I get back to the idea that I want to knock out 10 hours of writing a week. And I don't want to do it on the weekends because for me, that is just not practical because I'm at home and I don't like to write at home and kids are at home, etc. So for me, I'm working a little bit harder. And this is why I think this exercise is useful, is I'm working harder to figure out, okay, but where can I still get some writing time in here and thinking about it logistically? So some stuff that's not happening that you see that I have not done yet is I'm not working on putting in, for example, my office hours. For me, I put office hours in after I schedule in writing time because I want to think about when can I make this work where I'm not trying to do writing during my office hours. So this is something that I work with new faculty a lot where we talk about time management. And that's one of the first mistakes is faculty think, well, I'm going to write during my office hours. Well, even though we're in a moment where people are returning to campuses, I don't want to say post-COVID, but in a moment where we're managing with COVID, we still have many, students, and many of us are at institutions where students want to see us. They want to come to office hours, and even if you're not doing face-to-face visits with students, you might be meeting with them online, or you might need that time to address their concerns. So what I do with office hours is that is when I'm doing a lot of the email checking, because this is always the question that comes up is, when are you looking at email and responding to student, concerns and grading and doing all that kind of stuff? that's when I do tackle those things. I tackle them during my office hours and then on weekends for some of the other bit of that. But as I'm starting to think about a calendar, I'm putting in all those fixed obligations first, but I don't consider office hours one of those fixed obligations. And for me, this has really helped immensely, because if we just think practically how some of my days are going to go, I will drop off a child, I will drive to work, got a cup of coffee, come into the library where I like to work, and I work before anything else happens. I don't check email. I don't worry about any of that until 11 o'clock when I'm finished. And, maybe it's a few minutes before if I have to leave, to go teach a class. But another thing that's not happening is prep time. So when I'm really working through this kind of a calendar, I don't actually put prep time on my Outlook calendar. This is something that people will say, like, when are you grading? When are you prepping? I don't, because I tend to use very specific timeframes for that don't change a whole lot for me. So for example, a lot of grading I get completed when my daughters are both gone during hourly activities at night. That's a lot of times where I'll knock out some grading. I do a lot of it on the weekends because I will do that kind of work at home. And same thing with prepping. So for me, at least, that's the way that I'm able to get some writing completed. Another spot where I do some of that work is after I pick up a child. When I get home from picking her up, we're both home for around 2 hours in the afternoon before anything happens. So she does her homework, I do my homework. My homework is the prepping and the grading. So there's some other ways to kind of look at this. For example, if you are a very busy administrator where meetings just get plopped on your schedule and they're all over the place, this is one of the reasons why I really encourage people to look at their calendars before the spring semester starts and to just get in there and claim all the time that you have. I've mentioned this before, that I'm calling this, for the moment, I'm calling it writing time on my calendar. So for example, I just put on a writing time slot I put on a writing time slot on my calendar for now. I have mentioned, if you have people that are on a shared calendar or public calendar, I'm a big fan of calling writing time something else that what it means, but doesn't sound like you could be interrupted. Because I have found and learned the hard way that when you schedule something like writing time on your calendar, everybody's going to think, oh, well, they're just writing. They've got time to talk to me or meet with me. Or even you might look at it as a way like, oh, that's something that could be moved around. I would really encourage you to call it something where nobody will know what you're doing, or it will sound like something horrible that they don't want to do. I'm a big fan of calling it like the assessment meeting or an accreditation meeting or something like that, even so what it is. You might even put some little initials next to it, like WT, like writing time, just so you don't freak yourself out that you're like, there's an assessment meeting if you named it that on your calendar. But that's what I will do. I'm not going to do that live on this podcast because I don't want people to know what the name of my meeting is, because I do change it every semester just so it's blocked. I know what it is. And then that way it's off on my calendar. A couple other things that I do also just in general is I try to look to make sure at least one day a month I have kind of an open day. Sometimes I won't even put writing time on that day, and I'll try to space out that writing, do a little bit longer on like the 4 other days in the week. And the reason I'm doing that is I think we all really need a day that's not so systematic and so heavy, and just a day to have a little bit of wiggle room for extra things. Like if I just need to take a little bit longer one morning, or I want to go to the art museum that day, if I could actually pull it off, or I want to have lunch with a friend. For me, the other thing I try to do is make sure that at least one day in here is not a really busy day. So like in my case, I can kind of see a few potential options to look at it. And for me, I know that it's going to have to probably be, I just shared a screen on here. I don't know what happened there. I know for me, just looking at my January, I know that I probably won't be able to build in one of those open days, primarily because I train faculty for tenure and promotion, and all of the mid-tenure dossiers are due on February 1st. So I have a pretty intense meeting schedule through the month of January, but I have the first week of January off. So I've had some of those built-in days. But as I start looking ahead to different days that might be workable for me, if I go to something like February, if I go to February 7th, and just kind of open up that day, I've got a lot of meetings on here that are still kind of sticking. One of the things I've also learned is that, whoops, sorry about that. Shouldn't be clicking on my calendar live. One of the things I've also realized that if I go around and I start clicking in here, if I had a meeting that I only had for a short period of time. So for example, I had a meeting that was only on it was only on Tuesdays for the tenure and promotion. That meeting, even though it's over by February 1st, I still left that time blocked out, because what I'm going to do with that is I'm going to make that a bonus writing session, because it's already blocked out. It's already, off the table. It's already called tenure and promotion. Nobody knows what I'm doing, during that, even in a shared calendar. So for me, I'm just leaving that time. So that might be another strategy that you can do. I know I just advised a client who had a class that used to be, I don't know, it was like 1 to 2:15, or I don't know what it was, but something like that. But now she wasn't teaching at that time anymore, but she had blocked that time for the whole year. We talked about if she just left it blocked, it's already a time that people think she's not available to meet. So might be another way that you can get some other writing squeezed in. But the main lesson here, kind of the final takeaway, is that being really proactive and kind of looking around to see when could I possibly pull off writing. It might be something where you have to go through day by day because your schedule is so crazy. And I can see mine's a little messier than I thought it would be, even though I'm not teaching quite as much. So that's going to be my next step, is to kind of go through day by day, seeing where I can do writing time. But I'm also going to look for conflicts. Like, for example, what happens if a medical appointment is right in the middle of writing time? Where am I going to put those hours back in the day? I had referenced a podcast episode about how I got writing time back after I got interrupted. I definitely will link to that episode, because it shows on that one, I do kind of a live math equation about how I figured out how to get that time back. And I think, one of the proactive benefits from doing scheduling this way and figuring out when you're going to write is you're already heading off some of those things that could derail writing. So if this is one of the services that we offer at Defend and Publish, soon to be Defend, Publish, and Lead. And so we really encourage clients that, just want to walk through a spring semester with us. We're happy to do it. Or if you get spring going and you realize it's kind of a mess and you're not getting writing done, this is something that we can do with you. If you want to just hop on a call, share a screen, we can do some tweaking. We do lots of semester plans and things like that. So one thing too, I had not talked about in this particular episode, but I will do it in a future episode, is what kinds of projects I know that I'm going to work on this spring. Sometimes I'm carrying over the same writing project, but I noticed that, I didn't notice. I know that I turned in a book manuscript. And so I finished kind of a big project. I can't do anything with it for a while. And so I know there's some projects that I want to get to in the spring. And so one of the things that I like to do is also sort of match up the semester with writing projects and figure out what can I pull off with the kind of writing time I have available in the semester. So in a future episode, it may be, I'm not sure if it's going to be the next one or not, but it'll be one that'll come fairly quickly after this one. I will show what kinds of projects I ended up settling on for the spring, and then how I sort of figured out what projects go in what work time. So hopefully this has been helpful for you to think about as you work towards your own writing schedule, and happy writing.